When it comes to making your art better and improving it, it's important to have a framework and a way of thinking about things so that you don't get lost. This is especially tricky today when it's so easy to fall for many of the common pitfalls when it comes to getting attention. Going after and chasing likes and certain types of engagement with your art, looking at what other people are doing that works, or chasing the lowest common denominators of sex, violence, and metaphorical rock and roll. Recently on the Drawing Codex channel, I outlined a framework for thinking about and navigating this process of finding your style and, as I like to say, giving it volume over time. And what I want to do in this episode is dig a little bit deeper into this and talk about why I think having a framework for thinking about how to improve your art is so important. Welcome to the Visual Scholar Podcast. My name is Mcburnie. I have been a professional working artist for over 20 years, and on this show, we're all about demystifying the worlds of art, creativity, and productivity so that you can get better faster and enjoy your artistic journey. Check out my free brainstorming toolkit. If you want to take your art to the next level and really improve your skills, one of the best ways is to create your own personal artistic project. And to do that, you need a great idea. An idea that you're passionate about, that is unique and original to you, that is going to allow you to see this project through. I've taken the same tools and frameworks that I use every day and created a workshop on world building, ideation, and brainstorming. In it, you'll learn things like how to quiet the editing mind, how to enhance your blue sky brainstorming ability, and how to use brainstorming anchors for things like story or even your pre-existing ideas and proclivities as an artist. This is a free training. I think you're really going to enjoy it. So if that is something you're interested in, go check it out. The link will be in the description. So let me first outline and just go over this basic concept. So I really like to use a simple metaphor to talk about this issue of taking our style or our personality and these deeper, more subtle aspects of our artistic self and adding volume, creating impact, really getting eyes on what we're doing, and hopefully moving towards some sense of us being able to build a successful artistic career, but not just one that is monetarily successful, but one where we are able to get more volume, get more attention on us, on what is actually unique about us. And I like to use the metaphor of sound or music as a way to kind of look at what we're often doing as visual artists from a slightly different perspective. I think this just allows us to take a slightly different, fresh take on this. And hopefully this will allow you, by the end of this, to understand some of the different challenges and how to solve them and how to think about them when it comes to taking your new unique style and stuff that you often have right at the beginning of your career and making sure that that actually carries through the rest of your career, and that you're able to apply everything we know about getting attention and getting eyes on your work and creating impact, and that we do that again in the right way, right, where we combine those two things properly. And I think this is tricky because on the one hand, there is this kind of idea of like, look, everyone is a unique, special snowflake. And that has been really turned into a bad thing, right? And I think there's a lot of truth to both sides of that when it comes to a lot of people just kind of imagining that their particular feelings, right, matter out in the world. And often there's a lot of situations where like they don't, right? And people have kind of been told that, everyone's unique and everyone's special. And again, there's a lot of arguments, right? There's a lot of one-liners when it comes to this. But as an artist, you have to understand that a lot of the value you provide is in that snowflake. It is in being unique. It is in taking what is unique about you and amplifying that. And this is even more important today in the world of AI and other automated systems, and just quite frankly, the noise and the degree and the scale of like good art out there that is highly polished, that has great craft and impact. Often in these instances, we have developed the ability to kind of produce artists and on a production line, make people who can create very impactful work, great composition, contrast, color theory, make everything kind of engaging. And I think the danger there is that as artists, we're often taught how to do that, but we're not taught how to really bring our voice along with it. And often what you see when we look at artists we really appreciate and like is artists who I think who have managed to do that, who are combining their personality, what's unique about themselves, but also with the best illustration theory, combining great compositions, great color theory, rhythm, harmony, repetition, all these aspects that we know about what captivates the eye, and also what we know about what captivates people's attention in general. Sex, violence, rock and roll, dynamism, dramatic tension, stories, faces. There's a lot of these things that just people will look at. They've always looked at these things. And if you look at modern social media or the attention economy, people have figured this out and they just keep hitting that button, right? And I think the real way that we enter this kind of sea of different opportunities and this sea of noise is to really try and think about how in that sea of noise, a lot of it which is just really loud, how do you take your unique style and your unique ideas and really cultivate something unique that is actually going to stand out, but also then give it the volume that it needs to stand out? So the metaphor that I like to use is, as I said, one of sound. And the way I like to think about it is to break up what we're doing when it comes to just sort of starting out as an artist, going to the point where, like, look, a lot of people may know who we are and they appreciate and like our work. Not everyone maybe is going to like your work, but people really connect with you and resonate and like the work that you do. Now, again, this is your results may vary, right? This is a massive challenge, and I'm trying to just do my best to give us some good frameworks and ways to think about this so that we just don't fall for the major pitfalls, the really silly things that are just kind of quite obvious. But the three things that I like to break up are that firstly, what we're trying to do is in that sea of noise, in the modern attention economy, there is just a million people screaming for attention, and people are really good at it. People will use every button they can, every dial they can to turn up their own signal and make sure that everyone's paying attention to them. Every new trend, every way you possibly can, every new platform, people are constantly trying to get attention. And as an artist, what we have to understand is that initially, what we're going to be doing is building what I like to call signal. And the signal is a particular thing that you're putting out. It is your style, it is your vibe, your feel, the emotion. It is the thing that eventually, when people are maybe hopefully scrolling through a sea of this stuff, that they see your work and it gives them a feeling that is unique and is different to all that nonsense. And no matter what the volume and the other people screaming, they can hear your signal and it's unique and they recognize it and it's yours and they like it. This is this feeling that you often get when you see art that you really enjoy. What we're often looking for out of artists that we enjoy is just a little bit of some particular feeling. This can be dynamic, it can be visceral, it could be horrific, it could be extremely hyper-violent, it could be really chill and relaxed, it could be fun, it could be whimsical, it could be nonsensical. Whatever it is, when you see a great webcomic, a great piece of art, a great sketch, a great whatever it is. And a lot of people are making their art not as visual artists, but they're just making their art on TikTok, on Instagram, as people, making up personalities, making up little shows, little things to entertain each other. You're just after some sense of a feeling from that person, a way they make you feel, the way that they make you think about the world in some particular way. And that helps you on your journey. And that's what we're all about as artists, essentially. We're often just making a small little impact, but for a lot of people over time, it can build and become a big impact. It can actually have a significant effect on people if you're constantly putting out this little signal. In the beginning though, I think one of the traps is we want to get attention. And what happens when you want to get attention is you start yelling, right? You start screaming. You start pumping the volume on everything you can, and there's often a lot of traps to this. So what we want to think about first is not the volume, because the volume is where you can take theories that people have had for millennia, for hundreds of thousands of years potentially about how to attract the eye, what people are interested in, how to use, again, the great oratory traditions of the world to get people's attention, to tell story, to frame up ideas. This stuff has existed forever and it will exist forever. It's just part of human society, human culture. As I said, sex, violence, rock and roll, people's faces, a contrast, right? These are things that just the eye, the animalistic version of us is just attracted to. It's like the squirrel. It is the shiny object. We can add that later, right? That is the craft of getting attention. That is the craft of making images that have a certain level of volume, that attract the eye, that have appeal, that have rhythm, harmony, beauty, impact, all of these things, whatever you want. Initially, though, often what we do have is something unique that we do feel, a style that we feel either we want to emulate and change a little bit if you're really a fan of a particular artist. You have a genre that you're sort of interested in, but often people do see a gap really early on where they're like, oh, I really have a unique view on this. I have a unique take. And I see a lot of students who come into university environments from high school, and they often have really unique, interesting ideas that are just unformed. In the beginning, what we're trying to do is build signal. You're trying to build a unique voice, a unique way of saying things, of doing things, of viewing the world, a unique combination of artistic craft and skill and purpose that may be highly impactful, right? It may be subtle, it may be whimsical, whatever it is, but we're trying to build clarity within that signal. Now, in the wider world, if you put that early work out there, it's probably not going to get much attention. Right? It's probably going to get ignored. It's probably going to get people to be like, I can't even hear what you're saying. But what we're after initially is just to build the signal and really make sure that we're clear about who we are, we're clear about what we want to do. And this is often something that we skip early on. And as artists who are interested in entertainment design and storytelling and making comics and world building and fantasy, which is probably you if you're kind of listening to this, because that's what we often are talking about. You know, there are a lot of these ideas of, you know, finding your voice and finding your style that come from sort of the fine art tradition, right? Where it's really about thinking about who you are and what's unique about you. And we often forget craft. But I think a little bit of that will go a long way, of just appreciating the signal and understanding that in the beginning, what we're trying to do is just build that unique voice, that it won't have volume yet, but that we can add that later. And then what we do after that is to work on building that volume. This is where you can learn the craft to enhance your message, to make sure that your composition has more impact, that you tell a better story, a clearer story, that you practice telling your story again and again until it becomes natural, until you can add different nuance to it, different intonation, different emotion, that you can act through your art. Whatever way that you increase the volume, though, has to be very specific to the type of signal you have. And what's important to understand, as I said, is there's many different ways to create volume out in the world. You can do it through just pure sex, right? Like just showing naked people always gets attention. It's always gotten attention. And people often mistake like the fact that someone's getting a lot of attention online because their art is good. And it's not because their art is particularly good, but they have a certain amount of eroticism to their work. And that will just always get attention, as will violence, as will dynamism, as will dramatic tension, as will interesting stories. A lot of what we know works in the attention economy is story, having a hook, getting people hooked in the first half a second. If you take any training on Instagram Reels or YouTube or like TikTok or Shorts, the shorter it gets, the more important it is to hook people in the first millisecond, so that the moment they see that, they're like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen next. What is the dramatic question? So there's many of these things that we know function just on a human level, right? Violence, again, things that are scary, things that will freak people out, things that are dramatic, things that are political. Fear works really well. And you can use all of that if it supports your message. And there's also a lot of these aspects of how to make a great picture and how to tell a great story in a visual sense that you can apply as well. These are the traditions of illustration, the traditions of picture making, the traditions of just design that, again, have existed since, hundreds of thousands of years ago, when you had early hominids, right, sort of making adornments for themselves to try and get attention, to tell a story about, like, I'm important, or this thing's important, or this idea's important. Let's embody it with a visual symbolism, right? We've always been doing this, figuring out how to make people attracted to what is going on. And I think often, again, the real danger is that frequently people just pay attention to the volume. And in order to stand out in a crowd, we just kind of start yelling with everyone else, but you don't really have anything to say. And so even when people do get a lot of attention, it often doesn't end that well. And then the third thing that is often missing from that entire equation is that often when you look at artists and people who have actually developed a strong signal, something unique, something really interesting, and they've also developed the volume, whereby you can hear that, you're interested, your attention is on them, and it always is. A lot of this is because they spent time building presence, that they've spent time really thinking about how them and their audience function together, the things that really work, the things that don't, the elements of their signal that really sing and connect with people, the elements where, like, maybe people aren't that interested, and the elements of volume where this is the way to get people to pay attention to my message, to my signal. Again, it could be by just enhancing the visceral impact of the image. It could be by increasing the harmony, the subtlety, the sophistication, the mood, whatever it is. It could be by leaning into one of these kind of lowest common denominator, sex, violence, rock and roll type of things that are just always going to get attention just by, like, faces. A lot of comic books, for instance, really work because a lot of it is just faces and people and characters and drama, right? It's often just funny. It's just offering you a little bit of something that we're always interested in, which is like humanity and stories and narrative. Often when people get good at this, though, they spend a lot of time making sure that they're connecting with that audience over time, and that they're not just following any sort of creative little rabbit hole, that they're constantly building that presence. They're refining over time what works, what doesn't. And this falls, this makes a lot of musicians fail, like, really hard, is they just kind of get interested in making other music, and people like the songs that they sung originally, and then they're stuck touring on something, and 30 years later people are still screaming at them to sing that one song that they wrote, early on in their career. There's a certain degree when it comes to impact and volume and getting your attention from people, is that you have to play to the audience. You have to figure out what people like, and you have to respect that if you really want to build that presence over time. And I think often that consistency and the repetition and turning up and just sort of doing the work can make a huge difference. But I think you really are going to see the most impact overall when you combine these three things together, and that over time you kind of modify and tweak them. So the three things, again, are signal, volume, and presence. So hopefully that makes sense as a rough idea, again, as a framework, as a way to think about this. Let's look at, again, why I think this is so important. Let's look at some of the dangers that people often fall afoul of. So I think often one of the things that can happen is, again, you go out there into the world and you kind of don't really have a refined signal. You kind of have some ideas, but if you think about this from a musical standpoint, like, it's kind of a bit staticky. It's not true, clear notes. It's not true signal. People are a bit confused. They can hear some of it. They can hear other bits. They kind of tune in for a while, and then you kind of lose them. You haven't really figured out who you are. You haven't really figured this out properly. And so this could be very frustrating in the beginning, and this would happen to me. The reason I'm talking about this is, like, this stuff happened to me. I've had to kind of figure it out. And this is a really good way of explaining it, I think, some of the challenges that you can have and how to overcome them. But I think one of the problems that people have in the beginning is just they don't actually ever develop a good signal, right? And you haven't really thought about who you want to be as an artist. And this can be even worse. You would think, like, okay, that's like first world problems. But actually one of the worst things that can happen to you as an artist is you actually figure out how to get attention. You figure out how to turn up some volume knob, and all of a sudden everyone starts paying attention to what you're doing. But you haven't really thought about who you are or what you want to do or what you enjoy. And so then you're kind of stuck doing this other thing. And often, the best thing that could happen though is like you actually figure out how to like be consistent with that and make that happen over time again and again and really connect with people. But often, again, what can happen is that's not really you. So you're not really connecting with people, and people often can get really stuck there. And often this happens when people do commit too early on to volume, to thinking about like, how do I get attention? And you see this happen literally everywhere on social media. There's many YouTubers, for instance, who, over the last couple of years quit, right? They've been doing this for 10 years. They tried to figure it out. They kind of quit. Again, I've been an artist for 20 years, 25 years. I think a lot of these people just didn't know who they were. They didn't really think about what they wanted to do. They followed trends. They figured out some things that worked, but that wasn't really connected to the life they wanted to lead. And they just really didn't think about that stuff in the beginning. And you can see that no matter the success, it's almost the more success people have, the worse it is. Because the more you're kind of up in the stack of Maslow's hierarchy of needs with something really missing, with like meaning missing. So I think one of the big traps that, again, may seem like first world problems, but it is really serious, is that people just don't develop signal in the beginning, and then they go chasing volume. And for most people, it just doesn't work because we're not really amplifying anything. We're just trying to chase trends, to chase, other people's ideas. The other way that this can really be a problem is and this often happens with people I know in the industries that I'm most closely attached to, which is the entertainment industries, where people get jobs, and what you're trying to do is get a job. And you're often building a folio and a style based not on what you think. Like, it's really not about your signal when it comes to design as much. Even though good designers do have signal, they do have personal interests. Some of the best designers that I know of working in entertainment design have really strong interests that captivate like a huge amount of their attention. Massive hobbies that are just completely overwhelming every second of their day. And it's this insight and this uniqueness to their personality that allows them to add extra things to their design process. So even though maybe they're not 100% in control of everything that's going on in the design, because the design is more about the brief and what you need to design, the characters, the robots, the mechs, the cars, the environments, the feelings, the stories that you're designing as an entertainment designer are often there for other people. They're other people's ideas that we bring to life. But the people who do that really well, I think, are people who understand that it's the nuances of your personality that allow you to create very interesting designs, that allow you to think of things that other people just wouldn't think of, to come up with solutions that other people wouldn't. And often those people do develop a really good ability to create design that does fit the brief, that does fit that does its job for the movie, the game, the book, like whatever it is. The character fits the world, the design aesthetic fits the world, but it's still theirs in some way, shape, or form. You can still see their mark on it. Again, that is the mark of a good designer. Often though, a lot of us in entertainment design, we just chase jobs and we just chase styles that are popular or that we know are going to get us a job. And this often stems from the schools that we're trained in, the people who are training us having a particular aesthetic, and us knowing that, like, look, as far as we can see, in the next 5 years, like, these are the styles that are going to be popular. This is what's going to be good. This happened to, people I kind of heard about who got hired at sort of like a Disney doing 2D animation. And they kind of said, well, in order to get hired as a 2D animator in Disney, I need to make my work look like Disney. And then you work at Disney for some ridiculous amount of time, like decades. And then you kind of are like Disney. Your style looks like Disney. Everything you do looks like Disney. You kind of can't shake it, right? It's like a bad smell you can't get rid of. It's just, no matter how many times you reinvent yourself, no matter what you do, everything you do is still formatted by that job and that career that you had. And I see a lot of artists kind of falling for that when it comes to entertainment design. And again, like, a lot of people don't really even make it that far into those industries because they haven't really figured out how to imbue the kind of general aesthetic that's out there that seems popular with some sense of uniqueness. And this often means that people, again, it seems like it's going really well when those styles are popular, even if they do make it. But a lot of people don't make it because they are not inherently really interested in that stuff. They're just told that you should be doing it. And look, there's always going to be a percentage of artists who align with whatever is current and popular right now. And those people are going to succeed really well. And people who just kind of aren't into that, we often get shoved into like doing it anyway. And then we don't really create interesting work. And then often, yeah, people's careers don't get off the ground. But even for those people who it does work for, often those styles age out. Often after a while, those aesthetics, those feelings, those looks, they become old hat and you're kind of just like stuck there, but you're kind of telling someone else's story. You're amplifying someone else's signal. You never really figured that out in the beginning. And you just ended up being good at telling someone else's story. And when that story is no longer useful, it's not popular, it's not needed, you're just kind of stuck there, right? Not really sure what's going on. So again, I think figuring out what you're about in the beginning is just one of the best things that you can possibly do. So that hopefully has outlined a little bit of why I think it's important to stay away from some of these traps. Like, it's going to be pretty high value. It's going to really help you to think about this a little bit. A little bit will go a long way when it comes to considering these ideas. And if you can just not fall for most of the common pitfalls, do some really kind of basic things that will often just kind of head you off in a bad direction, then frequently, again, stuff just evolves naturally. Like we're pretty good at kind of figuring these things out over the long term, adapting to our environment. But I guess one of the things that really is becoming really prominent and obvious right now is that if you don't actually have something unique about you as an artist, something that really is connected to what you're just naturally interested in, whatever that is. Again, this could be you are a designer and you have a very unique set of hobbies or interests, and that really just gives your work a flavor that kind of can't be replicated. It can't be replicated by AI because it represents a strong point of view. That is valuable, and that what we're seeing that has kind of always been not that valuable is becoming really old hat. It is just kind of creating stuff that sort of has general appeal, that just is generally what we're kind of assuming everyone sort of wants, that we're generally not really thinking about who we are or where we want to go or what we have to say, but we're just kind of like, oh, I'm just going to do what everyone wants. That's what AI does, right? That's what it's always going to be good at. It's probably never going to be that good at anything else, but it's always going to be really good at doing exactly that, of looking at what everyone else wants and just giving you that answer. That's what the large language model system does. And that's what automated systems do. That's what a lot of us have been trained to do in entertainment design, is to repeat other people's successes. Oh, this style is really popular in children's book illustration right now. So your style that maybe is not quite what, maybe you haven't figured out the signal and the volume, maybe you haven't really figured out how to make it sing, but like, hey, if you just kind of copy this other person, you'll get work right now. It's hard to say no to that. We often fall for these like simple traps when it comes to our career as an artist. And I think it's just important to understand that that's probably not going to work that well anymore. That finding out and understanding and respecting that unique aspect of what you have to say, even though that sounds cliche and a lot of people might just be like, oh, that's cringe, but I think this is honestly what's going to make the difference. In the past, I think this has been important, but there's been other opportunities and other ways to kind of make money as an artist, kind of being in production, just kind of following and filling in and kind of doing more art that is just the same as what everyone else has been doing. It's been possible to kind of be relatively successful doing that. But I think going forward, that's going to be less and less the case. That really going forward, people are going to be looking for something that is unique, something that is a point of view. But the thing is that now we have so much information about how to make good pictures. We have so much great training about what is involved, about how to improve your craft, how to improve other aspects of your artistic picture making, how to develop a good process, how to combine different skills. It really is a matter of often us just putting it together now. We often get distracted from these larger goals of, again, having an opinion, having a point of view, refining it, and contemplating and spending time thinking about yourself, right? That's kind of seems like, oh, that's a bit airy-fairy, that's a bit artsy, that's a bit pretentious. I think that is going to be really what it's all about going forward. And the more we can do this in the beginning of our career, the more we can refine this and contemplate these things and go back and just constantly be thinking about, like, what is this signal? How do I increase the volume? How do I get more attention? Because you need to get attention these days. But it's important to understand there's so many different ways to do that. There's so many different ways to get attention. It doesn't always have to be through getting to the top of the pile of likes and follows and views and watch time. That often there's so many people out there that are interested in so many things, and so many people these days are sick of just seeing the same thing. We actually want uniqueness, and I think the trick is, the real opportunity today is this is rarefied air. Like, this is virgin territory. There actually aren't a lot of people really thinking this way, because everyone up to now has really been mostly focused on how to get more attention, right? Like how to just pull all these kind of really lowest common denominator strings, how to do retention editing, how to be exactly like Mr. Beast. People are just copying each other constantly. And as an artist, I think one of the things that we understand better than anyone else is how to be unique, how to say interesting things. It's kind of how we're built. We often do just want to be original. And if that's something you're thinking, I think now's a good time to dive into that, to double down on that and really think about what is the signal you have in the world, how to increase the volume, how to get more attention on that without disrupting it, without just kind of doing something completely different, to really meditate and contemplate what your message is and how to do more of it, how to make it louder, how to make more people pay attention to that, and then how to do that over time. I think these are going to become increasingly more important skills for the artist. Let's do a couple of takeaways before we jump out of here, just to summarize all of this, hopefully, and see if we can get some key things to take away. Firstly, if we look at this from an analytical point of view, I think to me, what this really says is that I think we've kind of reached a point where these ideas are going to become more and more important. And the reason is that we have kind of plumbed the depths of what it takes to get attention. We kind of knew this 100 years ago when people were struggling to get attention on the newsstands, to create posters, to get attention. We've been knowing this, though, for hundreds of thousands of years when it comes to creating things to force and focus people's attention. But I would say over the last sort of 10 or 20 years, we have really started to dial this in. And you can see to the point where like AI can kind of replicate it. Like it is almost a formula. You can do retention editing. You can basically take any old thing that is completely pointless, a soulless idea, and just through editing, cutting, shaking the camera, moving, constantly kind of hooking people and teasing them, you can kind of make people pay attention to any old thing, basically. We kind of perfected this. I think what is going to be important going forward is the message. And I think the interesting thing is it's often something that we start with anyway, and it's something that we're kind of told not to worry about. And it's one of the things that is ultimately going to be the most high value for you in your career over the long term. If you want a really simple way of looking at this, I guess you could say, turn the volume up on your own signal. Don't just make noise. If we look at this from a practical takeaway, like what could you actually do? The best thing to do is to really look at what aspects of impact, of visual impact, of illustration theory, of attention theory, things that you can kind of know through research, through looking at the literature, looking at books on illustration, looking at what people recommend you to do on social media, just looking at what gets attention. Take the things that do work because they're important. This is not a matter of like volume being an evil thing, yelling being an evil thing. This is a matter of taking the signal that you have and figuring out how to turn the volume up on it. And this is something that will help you understand this over the long term. The more that you figure out what your signal is, the more you're going to figure out how to increase the volume on it. The more that you try and turn the volume up on something and you realize that didn't work for you, it may have gotten attention, but it got the wrong attention, or it didn't get any attention, the more you're going to understand these things go together and the more you're going to be able to build them. But really just look at, I guess, one simple thing here. What are some aspects of picture making theory that you could apply to your art that would increase the volume on it without upsetting that signal, right? Without being untrue to who you are and what your art is actually about. If we finally look at this from a philosophical and spiritual point of view, what's a major takeaway here? I think if we zoom out, I think it's interesting that often in the Industrial Revolution, we have been, I guess, party, and we've benefited as artists a lot from mass production, being able to create our own books and being able to be designers and illustrators who've played a major part, like a really integral part of a lot of marketing and advertising and making and taking advantage of mass-produced products to kind of imbue them with some sense of personality that you just don't get when something is mass-produced. We've been a great ally to this whole system. And in order to do that, we're often told to forego our own personality, that we're not artists, that we are just kind of illustrators. We're just sort of craftspeople. We're just there to kind of make these things happen, to make a better, cereal box, to make a better bar of chocolate, right? Make a better advertising, make a better mascot, make a better illustration. Again, we've been part of that system for a long time. And a lot of the educational systems that we have really been designed to kind of iron out the kinks. Because what has been really important over the years has been to make things look professional and clean. Because pre-computational art, right, like pre-InDesign and pre-Photoshop, it was really hard to make stuff clean, right? That was a big challenge. But now I think the things that are unique are actually the rough edges. It is that style. But no one is going to help you with this because every educational institution and most actual educational models are designed to iron that out, right? They're designed to iron it all out and give everyone a uniform set of knowledge. And what will make you valuable and interesting, and what will, I think, give you true staying power and get people to really be really interested in your art is that combination of great craft, great volume, great ability to get attention and attract the eye, but also where you're using that to serve your artistic purpose, your artistic voice, your style, the vibe, the emotion, the feeling that you bring. And that I think that's what the next phase of all of this is going to be about. And again, it's just interesting that we've often been trained to remove that, and that most systems you have around you are going to tell you to get rid of that. But I think that is the thing that we often appreciate about artists that we really like, is they're handling those two things well. That's often what artists appreciate. And I think going forward, that is what people appreciate about everything in the entertainment attention economy, right? Like often what people like is just some raw person talking or being funny on TikTok. We don't need the fanciness. We don't need the cleanness. Often it's just a matter of using whatever volume you have, right? It's just a person talking. We'll pay attention to that. Is that interesting? Do they have a story? That's all you need. You just need the basics. You just need something that is unique. And that is often what people are really interested in. We're less interested in professionalism and corporate. Most people just want to connect with other people, other ideas, and find something unique in the world. They want to find a unique signal in the noise, in the darkness, that gives them a particular feeling. And if you get this right, you can provide that feeling. All right, that's what we got time for on this particular episode. Let me know what you thought of this one. I know I've taken a bit of a break from doing these podcast episodes. My goal is always and has always been to make this a weekly thing. I'm working on it. I have basically other things that have always been taking my attention, but I'm going to make it happen this year. That is my goal. And I'm trying a little bit more of a laid back sort of version of this, right? A little bit less edited, a little bit less polished, maybe talking about what we've been discussing. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Let me know whether this idea of signal, volume, and presence helps you think through it. I'm going to follow this one up with a couple more episodes that really dig into, in much more detail, these three aspects, I think, of building a lot of attention in today's economy of attention. So anyway, let me know if you like this one. Tune into the next episode, and I'll see you there.